So, hey, welcome and thank you. And I want to first say thank you to the organizers for inviting me to give the closing keynote. This is a tough spot to occupy because after a whole week of events, and I am the only thing that separates you from Friday 5 p.m. and for many of you, beer. So anyway, thank you for your attention, for coming. And thank you as well to the organizers and for everybody who's joining for making this happen in spite of all of this COVID craziness that we have going on. And it feels funny to I'm based here in Colombo. I live here in Colombo. I am in Colombo 5 right now, and it's funny. I'm sure we're all within a kilometer or two of each other, but we're here virtually, so we're even closer. What I wanted to talk about today was some of the biggest myths about Scrum and Agile, and particularly myths that cause a lot of teams to really struggle. And a lot of organizations to really run into trouble. It's kind of funny, Scrum, one of the defining characteristics of Scrum and of Agile too is its simplicity. And I think, that's one of the things that's wonderful about Scrum is that it is so simple, but unfortunately, because it is so simple, I think on some level, that means it's really susceptible to misunderstanding, to misinformation, to misinterpretation. And that's, I think, the source of some of these myths that we're going to be looking at today. And I've just picked a few. These are by no means all of them, and maybe, I don't know, maybe even not the biggest, but there's some that I think really cause a lot of teams to struggle. So anyway, without any further delay, myth number one: agility is easy. I want to share with you, actually, this was an experience I had with a team that I was coaching a few years back, and there was this comment that I heard from a couple team members. They said the sprint retrospective is a waste of time. Now, this really kind of took me aback because, of course, the sprint retrospective is at the very heart of Scrum and of the inspect and adapt that we're trying to do and the improvement that we're trying to see from sprint to sprint. And in my book, the sprint retrospective is probably the single most important practice in all of Scrum. And if it's a waste of time, then that's something you really want to tackle. What we did with this team is we used a technique for getting to the root cause of the problem. It's a technique called the 5 whys. And what I want to do is show you the 5 whys analysis that we did, getting to the root of what was going on here. Let me show you how this works. So get a big whiteboard, and I'm hoping this is a technique that you might be able to take away and find useful for yourself. Let me show you how it works. So you get a whiteboard, you write the problem at the top. The sprint retrospective is a waste of time, and then you say, why? Now, what this the team said was, well, it's a waste of time because we never take action on any of the issues. So you write that down, and then you say, why? Why do you never take action on any of the issues? Because we're going to keep asking why again and again. And they came up with a couple reasons for this. The first reason they said was, well, we always forget the actions that we agreed on. And the second reason, there's no time to make improvements in how we're working. So we wrote those down and we said, okay, why? We're going to keep asking why again and again. We started on the left. We said, okay, why do you always forget the actions that you agreed on? And they talked about it. The developers talked about it a little bit, and they came up with this. They said, well, we just haven't come up with a good system. Good system for remembering. And so he said, okay, why? Why haven't you come up with a good system for remembering? Now, what was interesting is the team got sort of quiet at this point. And I asked them, I said, well, what systems for remembering have you tried? And nobody said anything. And I said, have you tried just, writing it on a piece of paper and taping it up on the wall? I mean, that's a system for remembering. And then one of the team members spoke up and she said, I think the reason we haven't come up with a good system for remembering, we've given up on trying to improve. And several other people nodded a little reluctantly. And we said, oh, that's interesting. Okay, so let's park that for a minute. Let's look at this. We went over to the right. We said, okay, so there's no time to make improvements in how you're working. Why? Well, they knew the reason for that right away. They said, well, our sprint goal is always far too aggressive. We said, why? And they said, well, the product owner is pressuring us to set an unrealistic sprint goal. Every sprint planning meeting was kind of a variant of, I believe in you. I want you to make it happen. I want you to, work smarter and work harder and work some nights and weekends as well. I believe in you. And we said, okay, why is the product owner doing that? Why is the product owner pressuring you to set unrealistic sprint goals? The team talked about it a little bit, and they actually saw 3 reasons for this. They said the first reason, the product owner was afraid to say no to the VP's crazy delivery schedule. That was the first reason. The second reason for this, they said the Scrum Master is afraid to protect us from the product owner. And the third reason, the development team is afraid to say no to the product owner. What's interesting here, this problem they were having with the retrospective wasn't actually the problem, it was the symptom. The real problem was this stuff down here at the bottom. Now, of course, if they just stopped doing the retrospective, would that fix anything? No, that wouldn't even touch the real problem. Something interesting we did with this team after we did this 5 whys analysis to get to the root of the problem, we looked for other effects that were coming out of these root causes. Let me show you what they came up with. I think you'll find it kind of interesting. We said, what other effects are coming out of these things? And they said, well, because there's no time to make improvements in how we're working, because of this, none of us feel like we're developing our skills. And because there's no time to make improvements in how we're working, and because our sprint goal is always far too aggressive, our quality is really bad. There are lots of open defects, technical debt. And because our sprint goal is always far too aggressive, we're under a lot of stress. We're starting to burn out. And because our sprint goal is always far too aggressive, because of this, we never achieve our sprint goal. And because of this, managers are starting to micromanage everybody. Managers are coming in, asking for updates, 3 times a day. And then we said to the team, what does all of this together produce? Now picture yourself. You feel like you're not developing your skills. Quality is bad everywhere you look. There are open defects. People are under a lot of stress. They're starting to burn out. You never get the satisfaction of achieving your goal. And also, there's a lot of micromanagement. What would all of that together produce? Well, what this team said was, because of all of this, our motivation and morale are very low. Now, when you have low motivation and morale and a lot of micromanagement, what's one risk? Well, what this team said was we have a high risk of people quitting. And then we looked at this all together and we said, okay, well, what does all of this together produce? You're not developing your skills. Quality is really bad. Lots of open defects. People are burning out. Low motivation and morale, and maybe even people quitting. What does all of this together produce? And the team said, our productivity is much lower than it could be. And this is ironic because with a crazy delivery schedule, a really optimistic, aggressive delivery schedule, we need high productivity, but this team was getting just the opposite. And the biggest irony of all, this end result here, what's at the root of it? Well, you trace it back through the diagram, it's these things down here. Product owner that was afraid to say no to the VP, a Scrum Master that was afraid to push back on the pressure, and the development team that was afraid to say no. It's kind of ironic, actually. After we did this 5 whys analysis, the team did something very courageous. They actually brought the product owner into the room, and they showed this to him. He spent a few minutes just kind of taking it all in, just sort of looking at the whiteboard, taking it all in. He pulled me aside afterwards. He said, you know, Pete, the funny thing is, for the last few months, my big complaints about this team, their productivity is very low. They never achieve their sprint goal. The quality of what they're doing is really bad. It's filled with defects, and they're not motivated. Those have been his big complaints about this team for a couple of months. And I think for the first time he started to see how this all fit together. Does this look familiar to anybody? Is this a situation you've been in before? Wait. You're in this situation now, I heard somebody say? Well, I didn't really hear you say it. Your microphone is off, but I heard you think it. You could take a screenshot of this, send it to somebody. Maybe at the top of the email, just in the subject line, say, is this us? It could be an interesting conversation starter. See, this is one of the interesting things. Agility requires courage, because, you know, at the heart of agility is the recognition that things aren't as good as they need to be. We got to improve. Before you can improve, you got to recognize what's wrong. Now, some teams try to improve just by saying, we're going to try harder. In my book, trying harder is like the worst strategy for improvement I've ever found. Trying harder. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think it's admirable. I just don't think it's very effective a lot of the time. Trying harder. We gotta change. And change requires courage. Facing the reality of the situation requires courage. That's hard. So that's the first myth, that agility is easy. It's not. It takes a lot of courage to make it work. So what's the next myth? The next myth: Agile and Scrum will give us superpowers. That just by doing Scrum, by being Agile, we will all of a sudden attain a state of incredible superpower status. Let me give you an example of this. So how many of you have heard this phrase here? Agile, it's about responding to change. Not just responding to change, embracing change. So we should be able to change anything we want, anytime we want, as often as we want, right? Well, no, that's not really quite how it works. That's not how it works. See, let's look at how we respond to change. I'm gonna use Scrum because that's what I think a lot of us are doing, but the same basic logic applies to other Agile approaches too. So let's say we're doing a project. We're planning to do these sprints. Eventually, we're going to get to this point where we're going to do a release. Let's imagine we're 2 sprints in, and we've built a whole bunch of stuff, hopefully, and we got a whole bunch of other stuff on the product backlog that we're still planning to build. And you know, our CEO or our customer, they're sitting in their bathtub late at night. They've got a cigar in one hand, you know, big glass of whiskey in the other hand. This is what CEOs and customers do. This is what they call ideation. And they have an idea for a great new feature, and they come into work the next day and they go to the team and they say, guess what? Good news. I had an idea. Have you ever heard those words? It sends a chill of terror down our spine, right? And this idea, it's a big new feature. Now here's the thing. In Scrum, we do actually have a way to deal with this. Now, it doesn't depend on superpowers. It depends on making some tough choices about trade-offs. Now, let me show you, of course, what the options are in Scrum. Now, one option, the product owner could just take this new feature and just put it on the product backlog, put it at the top of the product backlog if they want it. That's allowed. We wouldn't put it in the current sprint. We've already got a goal for the current sprint. We put it on the product backlog. There's just one problem. When we put it on the product backlog, what happened to the size of the product backlog? It got bigger, didn't it? And what does that mean about this release date? Well, it's gonna have to shift. We're gonna have to do more sprints. In other words, we've got these 4 basic variables, right? In any time we're building anything, whether it's software or, you know, the people who built the pyramids, they had these same 4 variables: scope, schedule, cost, and quality. Scope means the features and functionality. Schedule, that means how many sprints are going to be needed. Cost is how much money we're going to spend doing those sprints. And quality is, of course, how good the thing needs to be. Now right here, if we increase the scope, something else is going to have to change. For example, the schedule might have to get bigger. And if the schedule increases, we add extra sprints, that's going to increase the cost of the project, isn't it? Now, the only bit of good news is the quality stays high. Now, what would happen if we increased the scope, but we kept the schedule the same and the cost the same? And instead, the product owner just went to the development team and said, "I believe in you." You heard that about 5 minutes ago, didn't you? What happened? What was one of the things we saw in that 5 whys analysis? When the team started rushing, what happened to quality? Quality came down. See, what's really interesting, in real life, these 4 variables are tightly linked to each other, tightly coupled, and if you change one of them, you're going to have to change at least one of the others, whether you want to or not. And if you don't change it yourself, the universe is going to change it for you. It's like these are 4 dials that are connected, and if you turn one dial, at least one of the other dials is going to change too. Now, in Scrum, we have this person called the product owner who's responsible for all 4 of these dials, because if you change one, at least one of the others has to change. But what if that's not an option? Like, what if adding extra sprints and changing the delivery date and the cost isn't an option? Well, we have another option, don't we? We can find something that's in here now that's less valuable than this, less important than this, to take out of the project. Where would we look for something less valuable? Well, we look down here at the very bottom. Let's see how much we have to take out. Looks like if we take out these lowest 2 items, that'll make room to put this item in at the top. Now, what did we do just here? Now, we increased the scope at the top of the product backlog, and we took out scope from the bottom, so the overall size of the scope is still the same. And that means the schedule and the cost can stay the same, and the quality can stay the same. But there is something that has changed. The value. What if the value that we're going to deliver, it just got bigger? The value, the usefulness of what we're going to deliver just got bigger because we put in this very high value feature and took out some of the lowest value things on the product backlog. That's pretty cool. Now, this didn't require superpowers. It did require people to make some tough decisions about trade-offs. And like we said before, Agile isn't easy. The good news is it gives us these capabilities that don't require superpowers. It just requires making some decisions. A lot of it comes down to value. That's the funny thing. Value is at the heart of Agile. Let's say we had a product backlog and we were planning to deliver it over these sprints here. Let's imagine we were building the new version of the Sri Lankan Airlines website. Now, on the Sri Lankan Airlines website, we've got a whole bunch of different features on the product backlog, and we could look at them by value. Look at the value of these different features. For example, there's features like this one here that are super high value. For example, enable customer to book a flight. Now, this is really valuable because, of course, this is where all of Sri Lankan Airlines revenue and profit comes from. And this is what a lot of the customers who are visiting the website want to do. And then we've got features like this that aren't quite as valuable. They're still somewhat valuable, but not quite as valuable. One example of this might be enable customer to join FlySmiles. This is valuable not because it brings revenue, but it brings loyalty. That's valuable. It's like indirect revenue or deferred, delayed revenue. And then we've got features like this one down here, really low value. Like, I don't know if you know this, but on the Sri Lankan Airlines website, you can actually look up and see what movies are playing on the in-flight entertainment system this month. Now, is there any revenue that comes from that? No. Is there much loyalty that comes? No. Is it a nice feature to have for? Sure, why not? Once in a while, a customer will see it and think, hey, that's kind of cool. Now, what's interesting is we could take all of these different features and identify a value for each of them. And then the product owner could sort this list so that the most valuable features are at the top and the least valuable are at the bottom. And then we start the first sprint, and in the first sprint we tackle these first few features here, and in the second sprint the next few, and the third sprint the next few, and the fourth sprint the next few. Now the cool thing is, when you get halfway through the project, how much of the value do you have done? How much of the value does this represent here? Much more than half the value, probably 80 or 90%. But the biggest win of all comes if we get to the end of the project here. And let's imagine our product owner made a crazy promise about the schedule to the VP. Ring a bell from before? Our product owner made a crazy promise. And when we get to our release date here at the end of the project, we didn't finish everything. These items down here at the bottom, they're not done. That's the bad news, right? But what's the good news? These items that aren't done, what are they? They're the lowest value items in the entire project. This is like enable customer to look up in-flight movies, enable customer to pay with Bitcoin. Sorry, I'm sure I just totally insulted a huge number of crypto fans out there. I should have said enable customer to pay with an obsolete legacy payment method like traditional fiat currency. Okay. You get the idea. We've got the lowest value items down here at the very bottom. Now, how much of the value does the stuff that's done represent? Probably 99%. So what are we going to do? We're going to take these features down here because the product owner was a smart product owner. She put down here items that can be dropped or postponed. We call this scope buffer. And the scope buffer just gets dropped or postponed to the next release to 2.0 of the product. And that means we can release a successful product right on time. Now, this isn't a superpower and this isn't magic. All it requires is a product owner who understands what's valuable and what's not. And a product owner, she has that knowledge and she makes the decision and she puts the valuable things at the top and the less valuable things at the bottom. And she also has the good sense to make sure that things at the very bottom are not must-have. They're scope buffer that can be dropped. You know, at the heart of it, Agile and Scrum, they're not about superpowers. They're about delivering value. And if you're clear on the value, you can do some things that are almost like superpowers, but don't require bending reality. It's pretty cool when you think about it. All right, so myth number 3. Agile and Scrum will solve our problems. I can't tell you how many times I've heard this phrase. I heard it actually last year. I was brought in by a services firm, and they've been using for many years more traditional approaches to software development, software project management. They were thinking of shifting over to Agile methods. What they said was our customers are not happy, and Agile and Scrum are all about making customers happy. So if we're more agile, our customers will be more happy. I mean, what could be more true than this? Well, we went through an interesting exercise when we were first getting started. I said, before we invest a whole bunch of time and effort in switching from your traditional approach to a more agile approach, let's make sure we understand the problem. more clearly. We actually did another 5 whys analysis. This is going to look a little different because this analysis I did not with the team, I did it with the senior management, and so I had to make it look much fancier on the screen. But here's what we came out. So we're doing this with the senior management team. We had the CEO, the senior VPs, and the VPs all sitting around a table with a whiteboard. So we wrote at the top, customers are unhappy. We said why. Now, the head of sales piped up. He said, well, projects are being delivered late again and again, and we're constantly having quality issues. And somebody from the delivery side piped up and said, look, teams just don't have all the expertise and skills that customers were expecting. And we said, okay, so let's tackle this. Why are projects being delivered late? And folks from the delivery side, they immediately jumped in and said, look, delivery date commitments are just not realistic. And the sales team said, well, but team productivity, it's lower than we require. The teams just aren't productive. And we said, okay, why are projects being delivered with quality issues? And the delivery folks said, well, a lot of our teams are using pretty out-of-date development practices and tools, and that's contributing to the lower productivity. And the other problem, the other reason the quality issues are there, teams are rushing development to try to keep up with the unrealistic schedules. Now, why are they doing that? Why are they rushing? Well, part of it is the delivery date commitments aren't realistic. And we said, okay, well, let's look at this for a moment. Why don't the teams have all the expertise and skills that customers were expecting? Well, we just don't have enough skilled developers available. And also, and the delivery team said this, kind of looking askance at the salespeople, customers being promised a level of skill and expertise that we just can't deliver. So we said, well, okay, why else is productivity lower than required? They said, well, motivation and morale are very low, and a lot of the teams are burned out. Delivery folks said, and there's so much bureaucracy, so much process, so much overhead. And also because we don't have enough skilled developers available, that means we have lower productivity. And the burnout is causing low morale, and the bureaucracy is also hurting morale. And why do we have so much bureaucracy? Because we don't have enough skilled developers available. And also, because we don't have enough skilled developers available, we'll wind up using out-of-date, low-skilled practices. And part of why we don't have enough skilled developers available, it's hard to attract and retain them. And it's hard to attract and retain them because morale and motivation are so low. So let's dig in on this. This looks like part of the root of the problem. We're really getting to it. It's a motivation and morale problem. That's really what's contributing to so much of this. Why are motivation and morale so low? Because teams are working under relentless pressure, and that's also making it hard to attract and retain good developers. Now, why are teams we're getting really to the root of the problem now. Why are teams working under relentless pressure? Oh, and also because of this bureaucracy, it's hard to attract and retain people. And why are people working under relentless pressure? Because date commitments aren't realistic. So this is the root of the problem. We found it. So delivery dates, that's at the root of all of this. So why are delivery date commitments not realistic? Because we have to make unrealistic commitments to get contracts signed. And because of that, we're also not just promising unrealistic dates, we're also promising unrealistic skill and expertise. And why are we doing this? So this is at the root of the problem. Why is this happening? Because it's getting harder to attract new customers. And why is it getting harder to attract new customers? Because customers are unhappy. We're right back where we started. So there's not a root cause. There's not a single root of the problem. What there is a system. Now, do you see anything on here that Agile or Scrum would fix? No, I mean, Agile would just be a new layer on top of this. It might change the thickness of some of the arrows, but changing our way of doing things, adopting a whole new set of practices, it might just add a whole new set of boxes to this screen. Now, don't get me wrong, this is absolutely solvable, but it's not solvable by tackling these things in isolation. It's not solvable by looking at this and saying, we're going to change this box from waterfall to Scrum, and that will suddenly cascade through the entire system and fix it all. It actually requires looking at the system as a whole and saying, how do we change all of these things? Not overnight, but how do we tackle this as a system of interacting forces rather than as an isolated set of causes and effects? And this, I said to the CEO, looking over to him, I said, this, sir, is the job of the CEO, is to see this system and to transform it. Because at the heart of leadership is leading change. It's a role we have at the team level in Scrum called the Scrum Master. At the heart of the role of the Scrum Master is to lead change, to make things better. But when you have an organizational system like this, it takes the whole organization under the leadership of the top leadership to really transform things. But it takes us, the individuals, to make this visible to them. So another thing you might screenshot and send to somebody. Maybe say, is this us? Maybe. So Agile and Scrum don't solve problems. People solve problems. So what's the fourth myth? Well, the fourth myth, Agile and Scrum are all about resources. I hate this word. I hate this word. 25, 30 years ago when I started my career, and yes, I am that old. I know it's impossible to believe by looking at my youthful appearance on this screen. But 25, 30 years ago when I started my career, we actually used the phrase human resources. And then somewhere along the last 25 or 30 years, we kind of got lazy and we just dropped the human part and we just say resources. I hear the word resource and it makes me think of something you kind of like dig out of the ground, right? like coal or iron ore. Resources. I when people talk about resources, building software resources, I picture these like oil wells on a desert pumping software out of the ground. And that word resources, it can lead to some really funny thinking. I want to show you an example here. Have you heard this phrase? Our project is behind schedule, so let's add resources. You ever heard this phrase before? Yeah, some of you have said this phrase before. Okay, so I want to draw a graph here. Now, on the vertical axis, I'm going to put the productivity of the team, and on the horizontal axis, I'm going to put the time. Now, let's imagine we have a team of 6 resources, and they're going along at this level of productivity, and we want to increase productivity because the project is behind schedule. So what we do, we add 3 more resources. Now, what happens when you have 6 resources and you add 3 more resources? What happens to productivity? Well, of course, it goes up by 50%. Right? Right? No. This is what we wish would happen. This is a classic example of what I call fantasy-based management thinking. Fantasy-based management thinking. When you add 3 developers, three programmers or testers or anybody else, 3 new people to a development team, what's the first thing that happens to productivity for the team? It goes down. Now, why does it go down? Well, because you got 3 new people. And these people, first thing we got to do is we got to find somewhere for them to sit. We got to get them set up on all the systems. And then we got to explain everything to them. We got to explain everything we've done so far. We got to explain why we did it. We got to answer all their questions. And when we explain what we did, if they're halfway decent developers, they're going to say, why'd you do it that way? That way's crazy. And we got to explain why we did it that way and why it's not crazy. And they get started working, and they make a lot of mistakes, and they're constantly stopping us and interrupting, asking for questions, asking for help, asking for clarification. And we got to learn to work together as a team, and a bigger team. And a team of 9, it's harder to work together than a team of 6. There's more complexity. There's more nodes, more edges, and for the communication and the coordination, it's just more complex. Now, if we're lucky and we added good people, slowly they're going to start to add value. They're going to slowly start to get up to speed, but it takes time. It takes time. And the problem is we added the people here, but where does productivity actually increase? Looking at this graph, where does productivity increase? Is it here? No, it's not, because for this period, we actually had a drop in productivity, didn't we? So there's not actually a net increase in productivity until we've, in a way, kind of paid that back, in a sense, earned that back. So we don't actually see a net increase in productivity until we get here. For all of this period between those two marks, we're actually behind where we would have been if we had just kept going with that original team of 6. Now this is what happens if you had good developers, but in my experience, quite often, that's not who we add. See, these 3 people that we add to this team, in my experience, a lot of the time, where do these 3 people come from? Other teams. These are people that other teams were willing to give up. Now when management comes to your team and says, sorry to do this to you, but you have to give up one of your people for the next 3 months to go on this other project, which person do you pick? Well, sometimes you pick a good person, sometimes you pick your best person, but sometimes, in fact, often, you pick the person you can spare. Sometimes you pick your most useless person. Not always. If you were the person who got picked, don't take offense, but sometimes you pick your most useless person. And this person here, this is Larry, lazy. This is Chris, crazy. You get the idea. Now, when you take 6 good developers and add 3 of the most useless developers from the rest of the company, what happens to productivity? Well, it goes down and it stays down. And you wind up here with more people, higher cost, and lower productivity. And you want to know the greatest irony of all? Those other teams that got rid of their worst developer, you know what happened to their productivity? It went up slightly. There's actually an old saying, if you want to increase your team's productivity instantly, take your worst developer and force them to go on vacation. See, this is the problem. Agile and Scrum, they're all about skill, not scale. And it's not just Agile and Scrum that are about skill. It's software development that's about skill. See, software is not built by resources, it's built by people. In fact, good software is built by craftspeople, craftswomen and craftsmen, using skill and taking pride in their work to build something good. And in a sense, that's what this entire week has been about. It's about reconnecting and deepening and extending those skills that we have as developers. All right. So, for some of you, this talk was deeply depressing because you saw, for some of you, a kind of an image of some of what you might be experiencing right now. For others of you, I hope you can find something optimistic in this talk, hopeful, encouraging. Because the beautiful thing about what we do is that we build things that touch a lot of people's lives. And if we build good things, we make those lives better. And that's an amazing gift to have in the career that we have been fortunate enough to find. And it's a career that there are some people who find it and it's not for them, but for those of us who find it and know it's for them, and I think like a lot of people who spend their time in this week that we've spent together, you're the kind of person who knows what I'm talking about. This is an opportunity to build great things. And I wish you many, many great things to build in the year ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pete. Thank you, Pete. So we have two questions from the audience.
Sure.
The first question is, what is the biggest challenge you have personally faced in a project you have worked on, and how did you overcome it?
That's a really, really interesting question. I mean, I think personally the most difficult challenge I ever faced. So I have a pretty wide-ranging career. I've done I've been teaching and coaching agile teams, but the biggest part of my career has actually been spent as a product creator and as an entrepreneur. I started a company many years ago called GameSpot, and which is still around to this day. It was a nice success. I've also started product companies that were just horrible failures, and I definitely learned a lot more from the failed products and the failed companies than from the successful ones. But the hardest thing to do is to recognize that the thing that you're building isn't good, and to say we have to stop and back up and get on the right track. Because especially if you're building something like you're an entrepreneur, or even if you're in a larger organization, you're building something for a customer, there's a certain little voice in the back of your head that gets louder and louder saying, what we're building isn't right, what we're building isn't good, what we're building isn't going to be right for our customer. And stopping and saying, okay, I gotta make a change, and recognizing that's maybe the biggest challenge I faced, and I faced it in a number of different situations. And then dealing with situations, the other hardest challenge I faced is being in really dysfunctional situations, really broken situations, organizations that are dysfunctional, projects that are in crisis, and the natural desire is just to say, I'm just going to quit. I'm just going to walk out of here. I can get a job somewhere else, and and the desire to just give up, and facing and overcoming that. And the moments, the things that I've been most proud of in my career, I have to tell you honestly, it's not been the successes, truthfully. It's been the times when I didn't give up. Because some of the successes came with great struggle, but some of them came just because I got lucky. And that's what success, success, often it is about being at the right place at the right time. And failure, you can give it an amazing effort and just not have it quite the right place or the right time. But those moments where I just looked failure in the face and said, I'm not going to let it beat me. I'm going to stick with it. And when you can turn that around and achieve success, that is the sweetest success. So anyway, I don't know if that was the question that you wanted, but that's the answer you got.
Okay, so we have another question from an attendee. He wants to know, do you think Agile works well with bigger teams, say with a team which has more than 10 people?
Yeah, well, it depends what you mean by works well. Now, if by works well, you mean Agile or Scrum specifically will magically make you successful, no, because that's not what Scrum does. What Scrum is a framework that enables us to inspect and adapt in short cycles. Scrum is a framework that allows us to work for short cycles of 4 weeks or less, And at the end of every cycle, stop and look at what we've built, inspect it, and adapt it. Identify things that need to be made better. And also look at how we were building things in that cycle and find improvements. So now, what's the one thing we know about big projects, teams of more than 10 people, or projects of 50 or 100 people? They are nightmares of complexity and miscommunication and lack of coordination and wrong dead ends and people doing the wrong thing and person X doing A that messes up person B doing C. And the one thing we know about big projects and big teams, that they are a mess. And when something's a mess, you need a tool to clean it up. And that's what Scrum and Agile practices are. It's a tool to clean things up, to see what's working and what's not working. The problem comes, though, when people think, okay, we have a project with 50 people, it's a big mess. If we do Scrum, Scrum will solve the problems. And Scrum doesn't solve problems. All Scrum does is it makes your problems really, really visible. But if you don't have people that are willing to take steps and say, okay, we've got a team, let's say we have a team of 12 people. We do a sprint. We didn't get much done. And we ask why, and we come up with 10 different reasons, and we take action in the next sprint to address those 10 different things. The next sprint will go better if we actually take action. But the problem I see in real life, a team of, let's say, 15 people who's been doing the same thing every sprint for a year, exactly the same thing, expecting a different result every sprint. Every sprint they do the same thing, but they expect a better result. Or they expect Scrum to solve their problem. That's just not how it works. I was talking to a team recently. They said, yeah, we've been doing Scrum for a year, and we've been the whole year we've been doing all of our estimating with planning poker, and it's just not working for us. And I said to them, and you did it for a year? If you do something for 2 weeks and it's just not working for you, a sensible thing to do would be to not keep doing it for the next 2 weeks. Try something else, and keep trying something else until you find something that does work.
Okay. Okay, the next question. What if a team has a better Agile Scrum practices, also been in a better place? However, if the management needs to push further, what's the advice you'd like to give the management?
Sure. Well, what I would say is the management should go to the teams and say, if you could change anything about your day-to-day work environment, your day-to-day, for example, your development practices, your development tools, your, how we do things at the company, if you could change 3 things that would increase your productivity by, 50%. Like if I said to you, I want to increase your productivity by 50%. What are the 3 things you change? What are they? And senior managers go to the teams, because here's the crazy thing. Your teams probably know exactly what those things are. They know it, but you might not know it, you being senior management. And that's one of the things that I did as a senior leader in a big organization that was doing agile development. We were using Scrum, but this applies to any agile method, is I said to my direct reports, I want to know every sprint from each of you, what is the one thing that your team needs from senior management to be more effective? That for every one of our development teams, I just want to know one thing that as senior management we can do to help them be more effective. And I'm not promising, I can't guarantee I can get it for them, but I want to at least know what those things are. That by itself could be a game changer.
Okay. Okay, the next question. We have a lot of questions coming in. Is it more challenging for remote teams to work with Scrum and Agile? Dev teams are from different locations. Product owners, dev teams are from different locations, time zones.
Sure. So I would say it's not more challenging to do Scrum when we're in different locations. It's more challenging to build software when we're in different locations. Doing Scrum, it's no more difficult to do Scrum when we're in different places than when we're all in one room. I mean, that's not quite right. I mean, when you're all in one room, it's easier to do a daily Scrum because you can all just stand up. When you're all in different places to do the daily Scrum, you have to get on a Zoom or Teams call or something like that. that. So yeah, sure, when you're in different places, you're a distributed team, some of the practices are a little more cumbersome, but the difficulty is not the Scrum part. The difficulty is the building software part. It's the communicating part. It's the collaborating part. It's the building trust and openness. It's building mutual respect. It's building a sense of teamwork. It's avoiding first-class citizen, second-class citizen mindset. It's avoiding knowledge, it's encouraging knowledge sharing and avoiding knowledge hoarding. It's all of these things. Now, I actually have a guide to this that you might find useful. I'll put it up on the screen here. Let me just find it. And can you all still see my screen? Yes? Is my screen still being shared?
Yes, Pete.
Okay, so if you all go to goodagile.com and scroll down on the left here, you see the distributed Scrum primer. This is a guide to Scrum practices that can be helpful in multi-location setup. There's also a guide, just back to the previous question, it's called The Manager and Scrum. It's a guide to how management can help Scrum teams be successful. So these are both totally free, and they're about 20 to 30 pages, so not super long. So anyway, you can get these at goodagile.com.
Okay, shall I move to the next question?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so this person is, I think, a big fan of you. She's saying, thanks, Pete. You're the best as always. Just one question. When you explain these myths to the management, has anyone ever told that, oh, this is crazy, and they needed to deliver fast as possible to be in the market? How did you successfully convince them otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely. Oh, first of all, thank you for the compliment. I hear this all the time, and sometimes they say it out loud, and sometimes I can see them, thinking it. And they're right. They do have to deliver faster. So it's the analogy I use is this. It's like you're driving a race car. Now, right now, you're on, a sort of a Grand Prix track, and you're competing, and you got to go fast. But unfortunately, right now, what you're driving is a, Toyota Prius, which is a fine car. It's what I drive, but it's not a race car. Now, we've got two options. One is we could try to find a way to drive that Toyota Prius at, 240 kilometers per hour. Now, is that possible? I mean, probably, but it would probably catch fire in about 15 minutes. Or we could say, what do we have to do to change out the engine so that we're not driving a Prius anymore? It's not a hybrid. It's, maybe we go full electric and we have, like the Sri Lankan electric hypercar or something like that. Or maybe we get a sort of an F1 car, but what management is trying to do, they're saying, I want to drive faster, which is totally valid, but they're saying, but I want to do it just by pushing harder on the accelerator, by adding pressure. And the problem with that, of course, is that when we add pressure on development teams, we very quickly wind up in this situation right here, where you're not getting more productivity, you're actually getting lower productivity. And the harder you push, the lower the productivity becomes. So it's not disagreeing with management's desire to do better, because I applaud their desire to do better. It's more the tactics. Now, here's the thing: if I was managing, a team of people doing repetitive factory production line work, maybe I could get more productivity by speeding up the production line. I mean, that's what companies have tried. But the lean revolution in manufacturing found that just speeding up the production line actually produced lower productivity because you get more breakage and injury and quality problems. What you got to do is figure out how to remove waste from the system. Now, in Scrum, we don't say waste, we say impediments. And this is coming back to that question before. So when senior management says, we want to double our output, we say, great, these are the 10 biggest impediments that are slowing your teams down. So let's come up with a plan to tackle these 10 impediments. I'll give you an example I saw recently. CEO I was talking to said, we desperately have to become more productive to stay competitive. I said, great, why are you using manual testing practices that are 20 years old? Why are you, I mean, if you went to a team and a development team in the modern age, and they were writing all of their code using a text editor, and they didn't have a code repository, they were emailing the text files back and forth, what would you say? You said, that's insane. We have vastly more sophisticated tools and practices. So I said to this CEO, I said, so why are you doing all of your testing manually? Because you basically let it get very, very out of date. Now, unfortunately, the good news, you've got a dramatic acceleration in your speed that is available to you if you can automate a significant portion of your testing. The problem is your team's going to have to learn how to do that, and that's going to take a lot of commitment by them and by you to make that successful. But the good news is once you do that, you will be a radically better organization. You will have gone from being, a solid, not even a Toyota Prius, but like a, 25-year-old Toyota to being, actually a pretty fast Toyota nowadays. And you can go even further in other practices, you can get even faster. So, but it is hard. Look, it's hard too, because a lot of times people in management, the top management, either they're non-technical people or they're technical people from once upon a time. And one of the things I've found personally is that the minute you stop doing hands-on development yourself, your practices kind of get frozen in time. It's sort of like a time capsule. And I find a lot of senior management in technical organizations, a lot of them still on some level assume software development today is still being done the way it was 15, 20 years ago when they themselves did it hands-on. And of course, in the last 15 or 20 years, the transformation is just, it's hard to even begin to describe how many things we've found ways and tools and techniques to do so much better and faster today. But yeah, so that's, a lot of it is, and I don't want to pick on senior management, but they're the ones who are in the big paychecks. They get the fancy offices. I should pick on them because their job is to lead us into the future. And they can try to lead us by walking behind us with a big stick and beating our backsides. But you're only going to go so fast. You got to figure out a way to really transform things to make things better. So.
Okay.
This is how I get on Friday at 5 p.m. I get a little religious.
So, we have another question from a depressed developer. If you are already overcommitted and already under a deadline for a delivery, how would you get out of that?
I don't know that you can without facing the reality of it, and then saying what are we going to compromise? Remember we saw before these four. Let me pull these up on the screen again. These four variables here: scope, schedule, cost, and quality. At the end of the day, this is all you got. And if the schedule is unrealistic, you're going to have to cut the scope, or you're going to have to cut the quality. Maybe you can increase the cost by adding more people, but as we saw before, adding more people, that's that can actually lead to a drop in output. Adding more people, you wind up here, and that could make it even worse. So now it's not that all hope is lost. One of the things we saw a little while ago, that example I showed you of that project a little while back, where we got to the end, they were behind schedule, the commitment wasn't realistic, they got to the end, and these items here weren't done, but these were the lowest value items. Now, they could have made another choice, which is to rush through this whole list and finish everything. But that would mean rushing. And of course, look, let's be honest with each other. When programmers rush, what happens? We make more mistakes. And when testers rush, what happens? We find fewer of those mistakes. So a team that's rushing, quality is going to go down. So we had a choice. We could either try to finish everything even though it's not realistic, and do it by rushing, and as a result deliver everything at lower quality. Or we can deliver less of the scope, so not deliver everything, but deliver it at high quality, and deliver 99% of the value at high quality, but de-scope these lowest priority items. Now, of course, it requires these items to be things that can be dropped. And unfortunately, if you didn't plan the project well, you often see things down here that can't be dropped. They're must-have features, and then you don't have a lot of flexibility, and then you don't have a lot of options. So, but again, I think there's one danger, which is to see it as, and I totally, the person who asked this question, my heart goes out to you, because I've been in your shoes so many times, and it's horrible. And that knot in your stomach that you feel, and that dread that you wake up to when you go to bed with, is just horrible. It's horrible. And the good news, and the thing I will tell you, it will get better. I mean, it might get worse and then get better, but it will get better eventually. The project will be over. It will be a memory, but the question is, what do we learn from it? Because again, I think one of the mistakes I've made in my career is seeing these situations as isolated events that just keep happening. And when you have a thing that keeps happening, it's not an isolated event. There's something deeper going on. And that's part of the reason why I'm such a fan of this, doing a 5 whys analysis like this, or that other one that we saw a moment ago, this here. That's, it can create a clarity of thought about what's really going on here that can be pretty transformative. So maybe one more question and then we'll wrap up.
We have actually 3 questions. As mentioned, adding more people might reduce the productivity. What is your suggestion to meet release deadlines?
Sorry, could you say the first part of the question again?
As you mentioned, adding more people might reduce the productivity.
Yeah.
What is your suggestions to meet release deadlines?
Well, the options are either reduce the scope, drop features out of the project, extend the schedule, or reduce the quality, or enable the team to go faster. Now, we saw a moment ago an attempt to make a team go faster by putting pressure on them that wound up making the team go slower. So putting pressure on a team, that's not the answer. Now, what do we do in Scrum? How do we increase productivity in Scrum? Well, we actually use a technique that comes from Lean. And as we said a moment ago, in Lean, if you want to increase productivity, how do you do it? But in Lean, you reduce waste. In Scrum, we don't say we reduce waste. We reduce impediments. And the way this, let me just pull it up on screen. This will just take me a second. Let me show you how we do this. So in Scrum, if you want to increase productivity, the way we do it is we reduce impediments. And impediments are anything that slow us down, hold us back, anything that gets in our way, interrupts us, distracts us, anything that causes mistakes or creates rework, anything that causes waste or hurts our motivation or just stops us from being as good as we can be. And when you reduce impediments, productivity goes up, and the beauty is it stays higher, and you work the same hours at a sustainable pace. With fewer impediments, you get higher productivity. And the great thing too is, if you look at quality, when you reduce impediments, quality doesn't go down. In fact, in many cases, quality goes up. This is one of the core principles in Scrum, is to increase productivity, reduce the impediments. And every team in real life has a huge number of impediments. This I'll just show you from one real life team. We spent an hour brainstorming, making a list of all of the impediments, and it's things like this, like our PCs aren't powerful enough, the requirements aren't clear enough, the goals are unrealistic, we don't have the right skills, too many external dependencies, lack of prioritization, lack of communication, customers don't know what they want, and on and on and on. And you can't solve these things overnight, but you can make some of them a little bit better. So what we do is we brainstorm a list of all of the impediments, and then we ask, okay, which of these can we do something about? And this is what, coming back to what I was saying before about senior management going to the teams and saying, what can we do to help you? It's what senior managers is essentially saying to the teams is, what are your impediments that we as senior management can help reduce or remove? So that's how we do it. That's how we do it.
Okay, right. Thank you, Pete, for that very descriptive Q&A session.
Sure. Hey, can I make one last comment? First of all, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone, but then I want to give you a little ad. I'm doing an online certified Scrum Master for Sri Lanka, and it's limited just to folks from Sri Lanka. And I'll tell you, I've had so many people from India who want to take this class. I've said, sorry, you're out of luck. It's only for Sri Lanka. And it's December 1 and 2. The details are at Good Agile. And this is a special class that I'm doing, and it's 100% of the proceeds. So every single rupee that we get from this class is going to go for educational support for disadvantaged kids in the northern and eastern provinces. Obviously, COVID has been so disruptive to so many kids' education, and especially in some of the sort of more rural areas, access to online learning is, tough. So anyway, we're doing this class. There are only a few seats left, I have to warn you, but it's December 1st and 2nd. It's Certified Scrum Master, 100% online, taught by me, and all of the proceeds are going to go to a very worthy cause. So anyway, just want to get that little ad in there, but it's an ad for a good cause. So anyway,
no problem. Yeah.
Stuti Bahuma. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming, and I hope you found at least a little bit of something useful in this.
Yeah, Pete, thank you. Pete, on behalf of everyone present, thank you for taking the time to speak to us today. Your session was one of the interesting topics we had on this year's conference. Scrum and Agile are very familiar terms to us software engineers, but it turns out that we tend to misinterpret its basic building blocks. It was indeed an honor to have you as our closing note speaker at DevDay 2020. Thank you.